One of the most powerful things I've heard and helped me was the past doesn't exist. The only way it exists is if you give it thought. Now you can pick and choose what I want to go revisit and remember. Why would I give this abuse and trauma that I experienced power? Why do I want to keep it alive? It's not even in my life anymore.
So you know those moments in life when everything seems dark, when you feel completely stuck? Well, today we're going to be exploring how one woman not only found her way out of that darkness, but now holds the light for others. Welcome to another episode of the Create Your Next Breakthrough podcast. I'm your host, Edmund, and today we have an incredible guest. And our guest is Shirley Buck. And what makes her story so powerful is that she's not just another coach telling you what to do. She's someone who's actually walked through the fire and who's come out the other side. She's taken her own journey through depression and anxiety, and she's turned it into this beautiful mission of helping others heal. And what really fascinates me about Shirley's approach is how she combines the practical mindset work with something that many of us might not expect, and that's the healing art of Reiki. Now, as an international best-selling author and mindset transformational coach, she helps people create breakthroughs by healing not just their minds, but their entire being. I can't wait to dive into this conversation with Shirley and to listen to her story and to share it with all of you. All right, please welcome Shirley Buck to the show.
Thank you, Evan. It's so great to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. It's great to have you, Shirley. Great to have you. So let's get started. For our listeners who are listening for the first time, they might not be familiar with your story. And so, Shirley, would you be able to share your story? What was that moment that finally made you say that enough is enough, when you knew that something had to change in your life?
Well, that moment didn't come until I was about 23, but I have to kind of tell you a little bit about my story before the moment of the breakdown actually happened. I was born to deaf parents, which in itself has a lot of challenges because you are their ears and their voice at a very young age. I didn't really have your typical toys and all that. I was an interpreter. In fact, I interpreted my parents' divorce when I was 5 years old. So I had a lot of responsibility put on me at a very early age, but I didn't really think nothing of it at that time because that was normal for me, right? That was my first language. It was just the way of life for me. After they had gotten a divorce, by the time I was about 8 years old, my mother became an alcoholic, and it progressed into she became a very abusive alcoholic. Physically and mentally, emotionally. And she was, now I understand that she was just very angry and she took it out on me. She had a lot of pain. I went to go live with my father, who was recently remarried, and she wouldn't let me eat there or wash my clothes there. She would get angry if a plate of food was in front of me. She'd take it and throw it in the sink, and my dad and her would argue, and she'd go run in the room and lock the door and all, So I started just hanging out with older people that stayed out all night. I had a half sister who was about 7 years old. They didn't reconnect or marry until she was 7, but she would leave the window unlocked for me so I could come in at night and sleep and things like that. But I just told my dad, look, stop fighting. I'll just hang out and do my thing. And he was more than happy to go along with that. Again, there's a group called CODA for deaf children, adult children of deaf people, because I think it's changed now, but deaf people kind of rely on their children. Your children are kind of the parent role. So he was like, oh yeah, you're fine. As long as you're out there doing your thing, it was easier for him at home. So I got a job when I was 13 at a local grocery store, and I would work for $10 a day. And I would take that $10, eat out every day, and save the change and do my laundry at the end of the week. And that man molested me for 2 years. So sometimes the only person in your life, the one person that is making you a victim or preying on you is also your only friend in life. And so sometimes it's I mean, I think it's important for people to know that, because I think there's a lot of shame and guilt. And I had to learn that it wasn't my fault, and I think there's a lot of girls out there that need to know it's not your fault, because sometimes that's your only friend. Because aside from that 15 minutes, he'd take me in the back, whatever, he was a very nice person to me, and, brought food for me, and, like, was this caring, kind person, but there was another side to him. Um, and when I was 15, I had met this 25-year-old that would come into the store and tell me he cared about me, wanted to take care of me and take me away from all these problems, and told me he couldn't have children. 4 months later, I was pregnant. At 15, really had nowhere to live. So, this was a kind of the pattern of my life. And I gave my son up for adoption, which was super hard. And I pretty much got into drugs and alcohol. I had eating disorders. I've been everywhere from 70 pounds to 200 pounds on the scale. uh, you know, um, but I just kept moving, kept moving, kept moving. I was like partying. I really wasn't focusing on the depression or the anxiety or any. I was just drowning it with all kinds of different unhealthy ways. And when I was 18, I got a good job with the Steelworkers Union. So I was making money. I was able to get my own apartment. And, I was still partying, but I had my own apartment. I was responsible. And I bought a Mustang, and I was just rolling through life. And when I met my children's father, and and I was engaged to him, I was about 23 years old, and I was safe, and I wasn't partying anymore. And I was, planning on getting married and having children and building a family. And that's when I had my breakdown. So you'd think oh, I'm finally safe. And I think that's when my mind and my body said, okay, now you got to face what's going on, because you weren't facing it before. You were too young at one point. So that was probably the most terrifying time of my life, even though I've been through like sleeping in cars and living outside. Like that breakdown, it was sink or swim for me. It was live or die for me, because I was terrified. My mind was just complete torment, fear, anxiety. I couldn't leave the house. I just stopped going to work. I didn't even go to work. I just stayed in bed. Thank God I was engaged to a great guy and he's, even though we're not married, he's still one of my best friends. Thank God, because he pulled me through it. And I didn't want to go to traditional therapy, because I had already seen some of my friends who had been through therapy for years. And it always seemed like they're in it for years, and they're taking meds. And to me, it seemed, not that it's wrong for everybody. I don't want to give that impression that I'm saying that. But for me, it was not the right choice. And I started getting my hands on every self-help book as far as mindset, because I felt like it was my mind that was going wrong. Like it was,
Yeah.
and I'm like, how do I fix my mind? And I learned how to think. I mean, it's as simple as that. It's simple, but it's not easy. It took a lot of time, and it took a lot of work. And that's why I wrote my book. Obviously, the book is my whole story, not this 10-minute spiel of it. But my publisher, when I wrote it, and for years people were telling me, write a book, write a book, write a book.
Yeah.
And I was, I mean, I didn't even write a book until I became a grandma, so it was, I just felt like, okay, the time's right now. And I wrote the book, and my publisher was like, man, it's heavy. It's hard. It's heavy.
Yeah.
So at the end of every chapter, give them a reprieve. So what I did is, at the end of each chapter, I put in tips and how I got over this particular thing, or how I went through that, and things that helped me get through things. So, and And people do ask, was it, oh, it must have been therapeutic writing it. No. The reason it wasn't is because I don't live there anymore. So for me to go back and live it and to write it, to present it to the world, I had to go back and relive it. And that's what I feel like therapy would have done. Keep you focusing on the problem, talk about the why, talk about the hows, and then when, of course, you're depressed because you keep focusing on the problem, then they give you meds to keep talking about it. And then the labels make you feel doomed. You have PTSD or you were manic depressant or you get these labels and you're taking these meds and it's almost like this hamster wheel, So, I think my grandkids kept me here. I know they kept me here when I had to go back there. So they're just, great and fun and happy. And
When you say they kept you, your grandkids kept you here instead of kept you over there in the present moment.
Kept me present when I had to go back to a place that was pretty ugly.
Yeah.
One of the most powerful things I've heard and helped me way back when was the past doesn't exist. And you'd be like, what do you mean it doesn't exist? It does not even exist. It's not real. It doesn't exist. The only way it exists is if you give it thought. Right?
Yep.
So now you can pick when you have that power, when you learn that power, now you can pick and choose what I want to go revisit and remember, because it doesn't exist unless you give it thought. Why would I give this abuse and trauma that I experienced? Why do I want to give that power? Why do I want to give that thought and keep it alive? It's not even in my life anymore.
Yeah, and so that's you shared a lot in these first 10 minutes about your entire story.
Okay, we're done. That's actually enough.
I got a bunch of questions that I want to ask you, but at the same time, as I'm listening to this, I'm like, how much do I want to actually go back into that, because that's the past. That's the past version of you.
No, but I don't mind talking about it. So no questions off the table, because I feel like someone who may have experienced something like that, I'll go back and talk about it to them. It's fine. I'm talking about when I was really focusing and writing a whole book about it. That's a whole different situation. But yeah, no questions are off the table.
Okay.
So.
I think one of the things that, at least that I found in my own life, is that there's different, because that's my background also, is a lot of this healing work. Right. And I've had to, and just like you, I've had to do loads of it in order to get to where I am today. Right. And a lot of that has been, being able to tap into some of the events that have happened in the past, in terms of, well, why were some of these things happening? Or what kind of person was I at that point in time, in order to perhaps maybe create some of those situations or to be around those type of people. Right. And so I've had to do a lot of that type of work in my own life. And that's why it's I'm so curious when you share your story, I'm so fascinated, because I'm just listening to, just to kind of recap for our listeners, I'm listening. I was jotting down some notes, but it's okay, you were born to deaf parents. So both your mom and your dad, they were both deaf. Yeah. Is that correct? Okay. Yeah. And then, so because of that, and were you the only child, or did you have brothers and sisters? I
had an older brother, 9 years older. He was out of the house and married at 17 years old. He started having he had 4 children in a row at 17. He was out of the house living his own different life. Even though we had the same parents, he had completely different mother growing up, completely different dad. It was different, because they were together. My mother didn't drink or smoke or anything back then. And she wouldn't even say a swear word. You know what I mean? She was a very timid person. My dad taught her how to sign, how to drive. Her parents hid her in the bedroom when people would come over because they were embarrassed that they had a deaf child. So, so we had completely different lives, he and I. And then I have a half sister who was the daughter of my stepmother. And in between that, when I was 9 years old, my dad had a wife for a very short time, and they had given a son up for adoption that was deaf. And he found me about 6 years ago. So yeah, it's confusing. But I do have other siblings, but we're all very far apart in age and demographically. Yeah,
Age and demographic.
or
Okay.
yeah, not demographically, geographically, geography. We're far away from each other. So.
So okay. So let me just get a little clarification there. Okay, so your brother, you had an older brother that was 9 years older. Did you had the same mom and same dad?
Yeah.
Okay, but it was just a different time, like because he was so much older, he was 9 years older. The
Yeah,
dynamics
and
between your
having
mom
four
and dad were different.
children at such a young age to try to support he and his wife were in a whole nother life than me. He was there to witness it sometimes, you know what I mean? But he wasn't there daily or you know what I mean? He lived in another state. He was trying to get his, support his kids and things like that. So it was a completely different life.
So I'm just looking at my notes right now in terms of the things that you were experiencing and how you had to grow up, how you had to, how the circumstances, how they kind of adjusted your path moving forward. Just from even having to work at a young age at 13, and
Right.
then there's circumstances that happen there, and then the things relating to like drugs and alcohol and eating disorders and and the different relationships that you had going forward. Can you describe? Can you share maybe what was happening during that breakdown moment at 23?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it started happening because I was going to become a wife and possibly a mother. And my biggest fear was becoming my mother.
Ah, okay.
So I kind of think that triggered something in me. And then I was just having terrifying thoughts like I'm going to go crazy. One of the things that didn't help is like all my cousins on my mother's side and everything, they're all like 10 years older than me. So when I would see them, like there was two cousins in particular that would pop in to check in on me every once in a while. They knew what was going on, but they had their own trauma going on with my mother's brother. It's a whole nother story. But they would say to me, like, how are you okay? How are you okay? So one of these days you're just going to crack. Like well, how are you like? And so they kind of put that in my mind, like something's got to be wrong with you. You can't go through all this and be okay. And I was always like, I'm fine. I'm okay. And I'm surviving. I'm making this happen. I'm doing what I need to do. Now I got my own apartment. No, you're going to break. You're going to like, people were kind of putting that in my head. And then I think when I felt safe, I got terrified, like, oh my God, like maybe I can't go all through all that and be okay. What if I can't? What if I can't be a wife? What if I can't be a mother? What if I am my mother? And my mind became this torment where I was terrified. I was terrified that I was going to lose my mind. And the anxiety was off the charts, off the charts. And when you're like that, for me, I didn't want to feel that way. I wanted it to stop. And I didn't want to go the traditional way because I really felt like I don't want to just keep talking to somebody about everything that I went through. I don't want to do that. And the Feel Good Handbook was actually the first book that I read. And it was tremendously helpful because it started showing me why you would think certain thoughts and that you're not alone. A lot of people think they're going crazy. A lot of people have what you and I may call irrational fears, things like that. And it started making me say, okay, this is kind of normal. And they were talking about millions of people on this earth. A lot of people are going through stuff. I'm like, okay, so these fears, there's a reason for these fears, so I started rationalizing things and trying to figure out why I was feeling this way and just worked on it.
Shirley, to back up a bit, during that time, you were saying that, so up until 23, you weren't feeling any, there wasn't really anything going on. And then somewhere around that time, like the people around you, they started like asking you,
Well, I
"Are
wouldn't
you
say
not?"
there wasn't anything going on because I
Yeah.
was drinking heavily, and
Mm.
I went through periods where I was doing drugs. Um, the people I picked for relationships or dating, not good, not good. So there was a lot going on. There just wasn't a lot I was facing.
Ah,
So I was just like, yeah, I'm the cool kid partying, having a great time. And now I'm making good money because I'm working at this job. And you know what I mean? I just wasn't facing it, but there was a lot going on, a lot of not good things going on.
so at that point in time, you became
I
aware of
became
what's going on.
aware when I wanted to really settle down and have a family with this man that I met. And, you know, that's when I started becoming aware of a lot of things. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's it's that can be a challenge. It's like it's one of those I've seen just from the work, just working with people, and also like even in my own life. It's one of those things where this type of the stressors and the anxiety, it's they all have, at least from what I found, they all have a time and a place for when they kind of present themselves or when they show.
Yeah.
And sometimes we're ready for it, and sometimes we're not. But it's one of those things where at least it's almost like the body stores this information. It stores it in different parts of the body and different organs, or even like in our minds. And so it's just a matter of it's almost like when we're ready to face it. But at the same time, it's one of those things where it's like the body, there's this defense mechanism as well, where
I feel like if we don't face them, if we just
yeah,
keep ignoring it, that's when the body starts manifesting
oh yeah,
illness on all kinds of things like that because it has to come out somehow.
you bet. At that point in time, it sounds like you were going through a lot, and then can you and then you came across this feel good handbook that was able to be able to help you shift. What was daily life like at that point? That like the challenges, and then what were you able to, and then how were you able? Because in that point of time when you were dealing with those challenges, what did you actually do? I know you had that handbook, but like, was there something that you did like in the morning time, or was there something that you were doing each day to be able to shift?
I was
Because like
grabbing that book and reading as
reading,
much
okay,
as I possibly could. I honestly stopped going to work. And for a while before I decided I was going to work at getting better, I was just laying in bed. I wouldn't do anything. I wouldn't go anywhere. I was and I remember my fiance at the time created an outing with my nephew and niece, like because he knew how much I love them, and was like, "We're going to the baseball game. We're getting out of the house. You're going to drive. We're going." I was like, I can't do it. But then I looked at them, and I'm like, "All right, fine, I'm going to do this." And I just remember I do have a faith of God, maybe not your traditional organized religion, but I have always through my life talked to God. And I told God, I said, I need to see a rainbow today. It was a sunny, nice day. I said, I don't know how you're going to do it. I need to see a rainbow to know that I'm going to be okay and I can do this work and I'm going to get through this. And I swear to you, we were at the baseball game. A little shower came through, and there was the biggest rainbow you could ever see in the sky. And I mean, they were even announcing it and put it on the TV, like, look at this rainbow. Well, and I'm just like, that rainbow's for me. That rainbow is for me. And I think that was a big shift. I think faith plays a big role too. It's not just mindset. You kind of have to have a faith in a higher power and a source, to that we are loved and we're not alone and we are all one, but it takes a while to learn all that, especially when you go through trauma and abuse most of your childhood, and you're not really loved. You're used, a lot, even by your own parents, Um, it's hard. So that rainbow, and I don't even think I wrote about that in my book. I don't know now, but that was a big thing for me. So every day I didn't go to work. I never called them. I never called. Oh, I just didn't. And I was there 6 years in the Steelworkers Union as a machinist, and I just stopped going. And finally, they were calling me and calling me, and then I answered, and I don't remember what he was. He worked in management. He called me to come in. He's like, "I just want to talk to you." And I told him what I was going through. I was completely honest. I'm like, I just can't. I can't work right now. I can't do anything. And he said, "How about I say that your job was eliminated and you go get unemployment?" I couldn't believe it. And I was like, "Oh my God, thank you," because I just stopped going. But I think because of up until then, my work ethic was pretty good. And I think they knew that. So they knew I wasn't just, trying to get out of work. I was really falling apart.
And so all these events, so it's almost like something was happening to be able to put the pieces around you to be able to start to rebuild your life. And
Right.
then at that point in time, what else were you doing to be able to rebuild your life, to be able to like break through to that next level?
I mean, meditating, praying, reading. I just kind of, I didn't really focus on the problem because I really, from what I learned, and even the book I came across even before I had my breakdown, Norman Vincent Peale, The Power of Positive Thinking. So I kind of always had those little things in life. Maybe the universe was like giving me these little tidbits of wisdom because they knew I was going to need some type of positive thinking to get through all the things I was going through. And I am kind of the person that kind of tends to look at the glasses more full. Like, I was like, oh, I have great friends. Oh, I have a great job. Oh, and I was always looking at the positive, even though terrible things were happening. I, in my mind, could sometimes be able to see past that. So that's really important to learn how to think. I mean, we all have to learn how to think because we are truly conditioned by commercials, news, society that the world's terrible. It's a bad place. It's a terrible place. It's just rotten. You know, that's what we're taught. And we're taught we have to look a certain way. We have to act a certain way to be accepted. We have to have this, and it's just, we're conditioned and we have to learn how to think. And it's sad, but we have to learn how to think. So that's exactly what I did. I learned how to think. And I love to meditate. People say, oh, they have, like I said, you just have 15 minutes, like get in there and meditate. And they'll set like alarms or whatever. They struggle to get in it for 15 minutes. I struggle to only do it for 15 minutes. I don't want to come back when I'm in meditation. I want to be there. So I'm like, I have to be like, so every once in a while, something will say, it's probably time to come out. You got to go do things. And I'm like, just a little bit more time. I just like to be there.
That's
But it
awesome.
took a long time for me to learn how to meditate. That didn't happen overnight either. But
For
meditation.
the people, for our listeners who may, because some people may know what meditation is, some people may not. Some people, meditation may be really, really easy for them. They can be in meditation for 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour, or
Right.
longer. Other people, it's like they can't meditate past a minute or two. So it's
Right.
like, can you explain like what meditation actually means for you, like your definition of it and
Well,
how
when
that
we
works?
first started, I was that person my mind was just racing all the time. I'm a high energy person anyway. I'm always doing something. So it was really hard for me to slow it down. I learned a method. I don't have to use that method anymore, but back then I imagined that my brain was kind of like in an elevator, and I'd go down from the fifth floor to the fourth to the third to the second, and I'd just totally relax. But then I'd go under this, like I felt like there was a shield, and I'd go under it to be in a realm that was really inside of me, that wasn't outside of me. So I would go under this shield, and that's where I would be in this. And a lot of times it's just darkness, but darkness sounds scary, but it's not. This place is a very calming, warm, silent break from everything. And if we can learn to quiet our minds, sometimes when we're quieting our minds, thoughts will come through, and that's okay. Pay attention to those thoughts, because then you'll start to learn where your thoughts actually tend to be. Are they more negative? Are they more stressful? Or do you have pleasant thoughts? And so you start to be aware of your thoughts, which helps you be able to control them. You also have emotions, so you have to figure out where you're at on the emotional scale. If you're feeling bad all the time, you're not thinking right, so perception's very important. So emotional scale, learning, being aware of your thoughts, all those things are very important.
And so you're sharing that going back to the meditation process, so the thoughts were going through your head. And then so you go through this process. And then was there a certain point in time where the thoughts kind of just stopped, or they were still going and you're observing them?
Well, in the beginning, they were going, I was observing them, because I also read somewhere to not be so judgmental, like, oh, I just can't quiet my mind, because that's what prevents you from learning meditation, because you're not easy with yourself and you're not compassionate with yourself. We tend to be beings that'll give compassion to people we love, but we don't give compassion to ourselves. And that's another thing that's very important to do, is learn self-love. But we're talking about meditation. So um, I didn't try to judge it. I just was trying to be aware of what my thoughts were. But eventually I started to go to a very quiet place, because when you can quiet your mind, your vibration elevates. So meditation's great for a lot of things. It's physical, it's mental, it's a beautiful thing when you really learn how to do it, but it does take work, so you got to just be easy on yourself.
And for somebody who might be at the beginning of that journey, or maybe they don't necessarily have a meditation practice incorporated, what would you suggest that they do to get started?
Stop watching the news. Because it's only going to tell you everything's terrible. Um, I would say focus on a noise. Like, I can put white noise on. You tell, your Alexa, whatever, play white noise or whatever, and just focus on that noise for a while. Just don't think about anything. Just focus on that noise. You'll start to calm down. You'll start to, relax, and then if a thought comes, you're like, okay, then reset yourself. Sometimes it takes a good 15 minutes to really get into the meditation. I've feel so blessed that now I can, but this is a long time of practicing. I can really turn everything off like this. I can just get in there, and I just want to be there, and it's good. It's good for your nervous system. It's good for so many things. And just a minute of it. I was at a retreat one time when they said, don't discount if you only have a minute. And she said, I'm going to take you through a guided 1-minute meditation. I was like, okay. I was like, well, minute. And I'm someone who loves to meditate. But she took me through, like, oh, just relax this, and then deep breaths, all that. And then she said, okay, a minute's up. And she's like, how do you feel? I'm like, wow, I feel really relaxed. It's because I just took a minute to be quiet, to just calm down, not let the outside world distract me. So, if you have 5 minutes, do 5 minutes. If you have 1 minute, do 1 minute. But try, because it is really good for you.
We've talked about a lot of the things that have happened in the past. Can you share with me what's going on for you right now? What's going on? What's life like for you right now?
Oh, I love where I live. I love my home. I love my surroundings. I love my family. I'm very close to my children, my son and my daughter. They're both married to great people. I have 2 grandchildren, a grandson and a granddaughter, that brings so much joy into my life. Right now it's cold out, but we're usually out riding bikes and picking flowers and just talking about all kinds of things. And so now that it's winter, I mean, we've taken a couple trips to Florida to kind of warm up, but I love snow and I love the cold, so it doesn't bother me. My daughter doesn't like it, but I spend a lot of my free time with friends and family and really enjoying life to the fullest as much as I can. I also love helping other people learn how to think. I have a 3 month course, and it's kind of a commitment because it is 3 months, but it has weekly lessons with daily activities, and then a weekly session with me as you're going through the course. And the session isn't really about the course because the course is simple. Again, it's not easy because you got to do it, but it is a simple process to change your mindset. The sessions are more about more customized goals and to talk through things that they may be experiencing or thinking about or things like that. So the sessions are more about their personal growth, and the course is for them to get in a habit of thinking a different way and perceiving things in a different way.
And when you say so for that course, it's more general for the personal growth. Does it address anything specifically, like any area, like the health or like
Oh yeah,
the
there's
relationships or anything like that?
yes, it talks about relationships. It talks about you know things that and it doesn't have to be trauma and abuse that you've been through. Like, that's not the only people I help. Some people are just like, I just can't think positive. I'm just angry all the time. There's learning what gifts you have received from any bad experiences, because there's always something good that's come out of it. And you can it's learning how to focus on the gifts you've received from going through that. There's emotional scale awareness. There's taking ownership. That's very powerful, because anything that you're experiencing, if you're not a child, children can't always help what they are going through. But if you're an adult and you're living a life that you dislike, it's nobody else to blame but you. You have to take ownership. Once you take ownership and stop blaming everybody else about your life, you've got a lot of power. Now you can do something about it. I dedicate a whole week to being childlike.
Love it.
So important. So important to play, to enjoy life. Because if you don't play and enjoy life, what's it all about? You're just going through the motions of going to work, coming home, cooking dinner, eating, watching TV, going to bed, going to work. That you're just going through the motions of life. You're not going to be happy. Of course, you're going to be depressed.
Definitely.
Especially, it depends on what you're watching too. If you're watching like the Dick Van Dyke Show, you make me, happy. But if you're watching news and a lot of dramas and a lot of you got to kind of take yourself away from the negative things in life, because there's a lot of beauty and fun and joy. If you used to like to color when you were little, why can't you color now? If you used to like to paint or dance or sing or roller skate, you can still do those things. Just because you're an adult doesn't mean that has to stop. So being childlike is very important. So yeah, there's a lot of things. There's 12 weeks worth of things that help with changing your mindset and your perspective.
I love how you dedicate an entire week on being childlike. And that's especially when you say that, it's like I automatically have an image of like Peter Pan and Captain Hook. It's like you have the old adults. It's like, oh, okay, you grew up already.
Yeah, I just bought a little jean jacket that was really cute in Wynwood Walls in Miami, that had it says, "Don't grow up, it's a trap," So, it's, you got to have fun. You got to enjoy life. It's super important.
So for adults or for people listening to the show, because they're all different ages,
Right.
like if they've already grown up and they're no longer, maybe that child is like hidden or is buried deep.
Find it.
You mentioned some things already, like in terms of they can draw or they can paint or they can start doing. What else can they do? What can they do to have a kid again?
Think about what you really enjoyed when you were a kid. If it's throwing a baseball around, go throw a baseball around. Like, I love to throw a baseball and with another adult and just catch it, with the mitt and things. And I mean, I go on, even when I don't have my grandchildren, if I'm going past the park with my dog, I'm like, okay, you wait right there. I'm going to swing a little bit, and it's okay. And I'm not worried about someone looking at me like, what is that adult doing there swinging? And like, you should be joining. I'm wondering why you're not swinging, you know? So it is important to do the things you enjoyed as a kid, because you shouldn't lose that joy, that spark, that, the curiosity in life. It's just really important, you know?
And I agree 100%. It's
Yeah.
to have that spark, because if we don't have that spark, it makes it a lot harder to go through life or to be able to
Oh, for real.
share those experiences with other people. And earlier you touched upon a point briefly. I'm going to bring it up right now, but you talked about self-love. And would you say that self-love is connected to maybe having fun or enjoying life or having that spark?
Yeah, I think once you kind of start to understand self love, you allow yourself to do those things. So, self love is another thing that I talk about in my course, but self love is seems to be the hardest thing for people I've worked with, and it was the hardest thing for me as well. I think a turning point for me during meditation, I chose to go back as a child and see what she was going through. And I chose a time when my mother was actually being very abusive to me, actually hitting me. And I, as an adult, what would I do? And I went in and I grabbed that little girl and I'm like, no, it's not your fault. You're beautiful. You're strong. You're fun. You're funny. You're gonna grow up and be this wonderful person. Just know that you are okay. And that love that I was giving that child, it clicked. It was a realization. Like, hey, that's me. I love that child. I want to protect that child. Why am I not doing that for adult me? That's me, and I have to love me and take care of me before I could properly love or take care of anyone else. So, yeah, self-love is huge. So, there's a lot of times we'll love a daughter and want to protect them, or a son, or a niece, nephew, mother, father, whatever, sister, brother. Why can't we give ourselves that compassion and love? So self-love is not taught by society or TV. You got to learn that and do the work. But self-love is very important. But yes, playing is a part of loving yourself, allowing yourself, giving yourself permission to play and enjoy life. Sometimes people feel guilty if they feel happy. And I remember telling a lady in a coffee shop, hey, I really love your boots. Oh, they were very cheap. They did not cost me a lot of money. And I've had them for a very long time. And I thought she was going to take them off her feet and give them to me. And I was like, whoa, your boots are great. Like it's okay to like something. It's okay to have something that somebody else likes. It's like people are so afraid to be happy. Like it's something, there's something wrong with it, you know?
So, as a
People,
coach for you, Shirley, when you see that, when you see somebody where you're complimenting them on their boots and then they're saying those things, what state of mind are they in? And
yeah.
then versus like the state of mind that when you work with people, or even like with your own perspective in life, what state of mind are you in? So, can you paint that picture of what she's in at that point, and then what the ideal state is that you might be like shifting people towards?
Well, what I think is she has somewhere been taught that she's unworthy. So she's in a mindset where she feels unworthy. She doesn't feel deserving of compliments, for one. And then she feels guilty because she was probably taught that she has to give more than she can receive. So now she has something that somebody else likes and she feels guilty because somebody else wants that. Where she would probably have to learn self-love, and that it's okay. And I mean, it's okay to be abundant. Sometimes people don't like people who are rich. I love people who are rich. I'm like, wow, good for you. That's awesome. I want to be there one day. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, it's, it's, she needs to learn self-love and to know that it's okay to give yourself or to own things that are nice, and to be able to accept a compliment like, oh, thank you. Maybe she could say something like, yeah, I bought these at this store, if they might still have them, or I just feel like people need to learn to love themselves and to allow themselves to have nice things. And it's okay. It's okay. You're not a bad person if you have nice things, and you don't have to give away everything you have. Yes, it's good to be generous and it's good to help others, but it's also good to give to yourself as well.
And so in those type of situations when they might get a compliment, they could just say, it could be as simple as, oh, thank you.
Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Thank you. And I think that's very powerful. Just that simple thank you. And maybe going through the day like, oh, wow, someone liked my boots. These are pretty nice, and feeling good about it instead of feeling guilty about it.
Mm-hmm. You're sharing your childhood. And then I noticed there was a certain dynamics that was going on between how you were raised and with your mom and dad. And then you had your brother. But then it's almost like that created an environment, and then it's almost like a trickle effect in terms of how you lived your life. But then when I compare what happened, like what the environment that you grew up in, and then almost like what you created now with having those relationships with your children, where you have a close knit relationship, and then you have that relationship with your grandson and your granddaughter, and you're riding bikes and you're picking flowers and you're spending time with friends and family.
Yeah,
It's like
completely opposite.
it's completely opposite. And it's almost like you have a unique perspective because you're like, you got to like experience both realities in a sense.
Right.
And when we compare that, it's like, from your perspective, like, what role, like, how do you see it, in terms of that role of like having those type of bonds or having that type of relationship with your children or with your grandson or your grandkids, or spending that time with them?
My children's life, I mean, they've always known without a doubt that they were loved and they came first. If I was in like after I was divorced from their dad when they were 2 and 4. So if I was in a relationship, they knew they came first. Nobody I was in a relationship could yell at them or anything. They had to come to me if something was wrong. If my children didn't like them, they were gone. Like, I didn't date that person. My children came first because I was fiercely protective of them. And I think it's because of what I went through. I didn't want them to ever feel unloved, uncared for. Our home was their home first. Nobody was going to take it away from us. Nobody was. In fact, I think I dated people who weren't, like, we didn't move into their house. They weren't exactly, they weren't exactly the person who had it together because I didn't want to lose what we had. I didn't want to take that chance. I was not taking that chance. We needed to be secure and safe. There was nobody ever going to say, you're out on the street. God, my kids were not going to experience that. So they always knew they were loved. And to watch my daughter's the one with the kids, to watch her, I think she's got the baton now, and I think she wows me. And she's like, well, I learned from you. I'm like, wow, I don't know. You take it to another level. Like, she makes sure every night she talks to them about things that are great about them, and how they should be confident. And what was your rose today? And what was your thorn today? And what was, like, she takes the time to really nourish them. And she says she learns that from me. And I know I did love them and nourish them a lot, but I also had to work a lot because I was a single mom. And, but she wows me. So I think it starts to be hopefully a generational thing, where we, broke the cycle of the chaos and the trauma and the dysfunction, and created a life of love, and happiness and joy and playfulness. It's important. My grandkids know they can play. They're allowed to be loud and play. There's a time and place, but they're never scolded in a way that makes them feel shameful.
Were there certain things that you did when you were raising your children where you were encouraging them, or were there words that you were saying or actions that you were doing throughout as they were growing up that had that positive effect on her, where she's doing that with her own kids now? Like, what were you doing exactly?
Mm.
What were you saying, maybe?
Well, I know that I would always tell them that they were loved and they were number one, that they never had to worry about that. But I was also, I was working a lot. So yeah, there were times I'd lose my patience and yell. Okay. But I would always then sit them down and say, look, I was wrong. I should not have done that. I love you very much. Just because I'm going through some things right now that are a little hard on me, I shouldn't be taking them out on you. I think I just communicated with them a lot. And about drugs and alcohol, I mean, I had a cousin who, had a heroin addiction, and she was the sweetest person in the world, but she had an addiction and it killed her eventually. But I didn't hide that from my children. I talked to them about that. I told them that drugs and alcohol abuse can only lead you to three places, death, insanity, jail, or death. Like there's nothing good. What do you want out of life? What things do you want when you grow up? Well, believe me, you can't reach it through drugs or alcohol. You won't get these things. You will only have bad things. And I think communication, lines of communication, just and saying, look, I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. To be able to say I'm sorry and hug them. I love you. Because I was learning. I was 25 when I had my son and 27 when I had my daughter. And I was just learning. I was learning as I went along. The only thing I knew is that I loved them and I didn't ever want them to feel unloved or ashamed. I remember I would take them when I would have I'd save extra money and take them to a super nice restaurant, an expensive restaurant, because I remember the first time I was taken out on a date to a nice restaurant and I saw two forks on the table. I was terrified. I had to watch other people like, what fork is that for? I just did not feel like I belonged there at all. I did not feel worthy enough to be there. I felt so uncomfortable, and I don't ever want my children to feel that way. So it was just a learning process. So I think maybe my daughter doesn't have to go through that learning process so much. I mean, I made a lot of mistakes. Don't get me wrong. I'm not perfect, but I think she learned a different way because she didn't have to go through the abuse to learn it. Like she came from a place of love and she takes it to another level now, and it's beautiful to watch. It really is. I don't think I've ever been asked that question, so I had to really think about that.
Let me ask you that question. So this was really going, when you were telling that story, this was going through my mind. So you took them to that nice restaurant, and then there's those like forks and stuff like that. So what was going on? Was there a conversation you were having with them? Like,
no, I wanted it to be natural with them. And it was funny because at like 12 years old, I remember taking my daughter, she was 12, 13, and I was taking her to see the Joffrey Ballet, and we went to a nice restaurant across the street. And the waiter, said, what would you like? And I pointed to her and she said, yeah, I'd like a New York strip medium rare, please. And he looked at me and I said, give it to her. That's what she wants. And I don't know why I was so proud in that moment. Like at 12 years old, she knows what to order and she knows what she wants and she's not afraid to order it. And it was really something for me, and I worked a lot. But I always had enough to provide because I worked a lot, and I was always like, I had a dog walking business that was lucrative. I always knew how to make money in different ways because I didn't have the opportunities to go to school and all, for years to college and all. That just wasn't in my, it wasn't even in my realm at that time. And but I knew how to make money. I could be an entrepreneur. Like I could go and do that and I could provide for my family. And I worked smarter more than harder. So I did have quality time with them and I was able to show them. And I would never let them think if we were short on money, which we were quite a bit, they never knew it. And I've always said, we're rich. I just don't want to spoil you guys. And then there was one when my daughter became a teenager, she said, I would believe you. And I believed that for a long time, but I don't think anyone rich would work as much as you work. So she kind of called me out on it, but I would always say, we're really rich. I just don't want to spoil you guys. I don't want you guys to become spoiled. So, I just didn't never want them to feel lack, like there was a lot of lack around. I think one of the most profound thing my son ever said to me, and he's an amazing guy. He's an amazing husband. He's just a sweet, sweet guy. He, I think he was about 13 and my daughter's 2 years younger. And he said, Mom, you know how you always make miracles happen? I said, what? Well, you always making miracles happen. And I said, where are you going with this? And he said, well, Aubrey really wants the iPad Nano, whatever it was called, for Christmas. So he goes, so you don't have to get me anything if you can just get her that. And I said, I already have that. And he said, see, that's what I mean. You always make miracles happen. And I was like, but of course he was also like, you don't have to get me anything, just get that for her. He's really a generous, wonderful guy. And he married a wonderful wife. And I love my daughter-in-law. And I'm just so glad because I kind of feared that he was just so kind that, maybe someone would take advantage of that. But no, he's good. He's good and everything's good.
It's awesome to be able to hear the whole dynamics of you and your family and what you've been able to create and how you've been able to foster this this environment with your kids that feels really safe and nurturing, where they have that, it's just where they feel safe and they can just be able to, even from the example from the restaurant, they're just being able to feel safe to be able to speak or speak
Right.
out and just be
Well,
them.
they had that way with me because I told them they can tell me anything. Like I remember my daughter telling me a story where she said, the teacher said to her, I'm going to call your mother. And she said, yes, go ahead. Like she wanted me to talk to that. Yes, call her. Because I was that parent that would listen to my child. I wouldn't just take the word of the teacher. I wanted to know, why are they saying this? Or like, for one, the teacher was calling her Audrey. Her name is Aubrey. And she kept saying, my name is Aubrey. And after a week of this, she stopped responding to the teacher because she wouldn't call her Aubrey. And so when it came to my attention, and the teacher was angry. I'm like, well, call her by her name. Her name is not Audrey. Why are we having this conversation? She has the right to be angry about that, So it's important to listen to your children and know what they're going through, because something that may seem little to you is big in their life at that age. So listen and allow them to have the feelings, and I don't know, and be on their side. Don't always think that just because an adult is telling you something that your child's wrong,
I love how you had that conversation with them.
That's awesome. Communication's huge.
Communication is very much huge.
A lot of people demand respect from their children without giving respect to their children because they think, well, I don't have to give a child respect, but yeah, you kind of do. If you want that respect in return, you got to respect your children too. So yeah, communication's huge. And I can honestly say I went through the teenage years with my children. It was pretty much a breeze. I mean, all the kids were at my house all the time, all their friends. I knew where my kids were. I was like, yes, have your friends over. I want to know where my kids are. And my kids also knew that they could call me if they were in a situation. I wasn't going to get angry. I was going to come and, we would have a talk and we'd get through it. So and there were times that, I was called and said, hey, come get me out of here. So you just have to have that open relationship with your kids. And actually, there's two more books I want to write. And I'm not saying it's in the near future because I'm still getting this. This one was only written last year. But I want to write about dating after trauma and abuse and parenting after trauma and abuse. So,
Nice.
yeah.
Love it. And that's one of the things that I really love about this podcast. And when I'm having these conversations with people, is I want to be able to discuss like what's really happening, what the person is actually doing in their life to see if they're actually walking the walk and living what it is that they're teaching.
Right.
That's the element that I really enjoy bringing into these podcast episodes. And I know from your story, what you shared, it's like, okay, you're living proof. It's like, look at your relationships, with your kids, and then look at the relationships that they're having, that they're creating within their own family. And as a listener, you got to ask yourself, hey, is that the type of life that I'd like to live? Is that is that person that I'm listening to? Is that person that's sharing the information? Are they living that type of life that I might want to have? And that's my goal in terms of every conversation that I have, to be able to uncover all these nuggets, to be able to uncover if, what's actually
I love your questions. They're really, they even make me think like, hey, and I was never asked that question. I like that one, and it makes me dig deeper to kind of think like, oh yeah, what did I do? Yeah. But thank you. Cool. I really enjoyed your questions a lot.
So as we wrap up, Shirley, what would you tell somebody who might be at a point in their life where they're like, you know what, I've tried everything. I've tried everything in my life and nothing's working at this point in time. Or for somebody who's listening and they're just like, or maybe they're going through a breakdown moment and they're listening to your story and it's just hitting home. What's one thing that they can do right now in this second to start that breakthrough?
Well, if you're going through a breakdown moment, know that you can get through it. Honestly, I'm telling you from my own experience, and you can get through it. So please find someone that can help you get through it. Learn to love yourself. Do the work. It's going to pay off. Learn how to think. It's going to pay off in so many ways, Because when you change your mind, you do change your life. I know it sounds like a cliche, but when you change your mind, your life changes. And then you allow room for things to come into your life that are good, but if you're always focusing on the bad, you're going to only get more bad. We focus on lack, you get more lack. Focus on the good things, you get more good things. So allow the world, source, God, whatever you want to call them, allow the gifts to come to you. And the only way that you can allow that into your life is to change your mind, to learn how to think. So do the work. It's worth it. It's worth it. If I can live a life when everybody told me, oh, there's no way you're going to be okay. There's no everybody thought I was doomed. And I love my life. I love my family. I love the life I created, and I didn't do it alone. I did it with help, and I also did it with faith. And I believe that there's a whole nother realm out there that have our backs if we let them. If we don't pinch ourselves off from the universe, from God, there's a lot of joy out there to be had and not enough people using it. So come on, let's get out there and grab that joy. Absolutely.
Love it. Love your story, Shirley. And so you shared a little bit in the past some of the stuff that you're working on. Go ahead and feel free if there's any projects that are there any upcoming projects that you're working on? You mentioned some books and stuff like that. What are you working on right now?
I'm not working on a book right now because I'm still working on getting my story out there. The book Sweet Freedom Whispered in My Ear. That is my story. And right now that I'm just working on getting my story out there so people can be inspired to know that they too can come out of it and come out on the other side and be happy. But I do want to write 2 more books. I know I'm going to write them. It may not be this year, it may not be next year, but it's going to come. But yeah, right now I'm really, focused on the mindset transformation coaching. And I do book fairs and book signings for my book and things like that. So that's what I'm focused on at this time. And playing.
And playing. Very
Yeah.
nice.
Yes.
And so for the people who are listening in, you said that right now you're just about getting your message out. Is there, so if people want to connect with you, how can they hear more about you? How can they connect with you? How can they help to share that message?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, Shirley Buck, and shirleybuck.com is my website. And Red Leaf Alternative Healing is the name of my business. So you can look that up. I do have a Facebook community group, which is just Red Leaf Healing. It's not Red Leaf Alternative Healing. And that's a community group. So if you find Red Leaf Healing, it's got a red tree on it. You can join our community group. I blog on there and talk to people through there as well.
Awesome. And the work that you do, Shirley, is it mostly online or do you do work in person as well?
It's mostly online, but I have had one or two people I've worked in person, but mostly online.
Mostly online. Okay.
Yeah.
And where do you're based out of where again? Just for our listeners.
Chicago.
You're based out of Chicago.
Yeah.
So anybody in what part of Chicago?
I like the northwest side of Chicago, but surrounding areas, Illinois is pretty much accessible. I mean,
There you go.
So
for anybody listening who's in the Chicago area, Shirley's going to be around there, so you can hit her up.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yes.
All right, Shirley. So thanks so much for joining me on this podcast.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
I really, really enjoyed it. And I know our listeners are going to get a ton of value from being able to listen to your story and all the gold nuggets that you shared along the way. It's like, that's huge.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And here's a special bonus gift for our listeners. We're all about getting you into alignment so you can live a life that you love. It's a breathwork meditation that I highly suggest that you do. Go through it, experience it, and share with me the results. You can access it at www.createyournextbreakthrough.com, or you can check it out in the description below. This has been your host, Edmund. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you in the next one.